Hey, my name is Snooze, and I want to show you how I got a world record in Islanders New Shores. Notice that I say a world record, as this game has recently added challenges, which allow you to compete in multiple categories. The one I was interested in was fully stacked, as it gives you all your materials from the start. Since I suffer from choice paralysis, it seemed the best first challenge that I could tackle. I'll take you through the abridged version of my run, but if you want to skip straight to my lengthy reasoning, check the timestamps. So I start my run off with masons, since they scale my city centers. I place my first city center close to a wall for later. I then place my second city center with a neighborly to get rid of the negative, but I forget to place a shaman in between them, which would bounce the wisp to and from it, meaning I would gain extra points, or lose less. I place my pyres before my plateaus and terraces so they don't get blocked by line of sight to the city centers. Here are the terraces that would have blocked line of sight to my pyres. I then start my residential district by placing mansions and cliff houses. I'm playing mansions specifically because they have a lower radius, and these ones are as close to the city center as they can get, as well as the terraces, so they earn me more points overall than playing houses in this area. Now I could be getting an extra point on each of these cliff houses by playing a wall platform above them, but that makes the cliff houses much harder to place, and if I don't get them as close together as physically possible, less are going to be around the city centers and shamans, and I'm going to lose points. You'll also notice that every building I've placed so far has bounced the wisp onto it, well, apart from the wall platform, but that's intentional. An extra 5 points per building is massive. I know I planned all of my buildings for this, but a 51 point mansion is insane, and the fact I get multiple is even crazier. This back wall is still the best place for the cliff houses since they're beside other cliff houses and mansions, which they both get 1 point from. Not too many, but a couple of them hit the city centers or the shamans, so they get up to 30 points. Let me tell you, I was riding a high like no other, seeing all of these mansions be 30 to 50 points. Shout out Connor Robinson. If you zoom out really far, you can get a better angle underneath wall platforms. You just have to put it near the top of your screen, so you'll see me really far away when I need to place some really precarious cliff houses or mansions underneath these two wall platforms. Now in this run, I thought that you could undo one of your duplications with a bargain, and that isn't the case, so I have to play a third plateau here. I then play a fountain to bounce the wisp onto it, and then a house beside the fountain to get the wisp onto houses instead of mansions, so I can now start playing my houses across my two terraces. These houses are only worth 13 without the wisps, so not that great. This is something that I could improve upon next time I do a run, but I had to take it here since this is how my city was already built. I start playing my houses underneath the terraces to hit the city centers. I normally forget about circuses in my regular runs, but I don't here. I leave a small cutout piece so that I can play a circus on this plateau to get the majority of the houses here, underneath and on top of the terraces for points. And then I pull my houses out onto the rock face so that I can get them scoring points off of the masons. I get underneath that second terrace to get the masons, the statue, the terrace, and the city centers, and then up onto the last plateau. Due to a misplay in my first house under the terrace, I have to shrink this house to fit it underneath. I then bounce the wisp back onto the cliff houses via a fountain. I play the rest of my cliff houses on this wall, making sure to lead it down at the end so I can play my mansion underneath while still bouncing the wisp to it. Here I go using the zoom trick again, twice. With all my residential buildings placed, I'm now able to safely play my tower.
And here she comes, a 640 point temple.
Now, my terrace is a little bit away from my wall platforms, and it's not getting any of my cliff houses, maybe one or two of them, but not as many as it should be. This is my biggest room for improvement on this run. I should be getting an extra 100 points on this temple easily. It also takes 59 seconds for the animation to play out for all of that score to trickle in. I was thinking of making you watch all of it, but I'll cut to the end. The fated circus. So I want to play my sauna to be able to hit as many houses, trees, and huts at the same time. So I'm going to play my 5 huts in an area where my sauna can hit them easily. This mansion and market will be in range of a guild hall later. The harbors and docks could have been much better, but I didn't have the chance to build my city as coastal as I wanted to. The island generation didn't play nice with me, and that's where I can get a lot of extra points in a future run. This monument is actually scoring as many points as physically possible without the use of boons. I'll talk about this lighthouse later. I use my precious boon on my pyre to get an absolutely massive 200 points instead of the expected 45 to 50. I use my score multiplier boon on my mountain shrine, and I play an unchanged Hermitage to end the run. So, how could you pull off a run like this? Let's talk about what buildings we have at our disposal and how each gains or loses score. I will talk about buildings in the order that I think it's best to place them. Pause if you want to read each of their specifics, and write comments if you think I got anything wrong, because this is not an exact science. There are going to be ways to eke out a few extra points here or there, and if somebody can improve upon this, I would love to see or hear about it. Let's start with Verdure. This building will place flowers, trees, or fish, depending on the highlighted area, and since we only have 2 buildings that scale off of fish, and a lot that scale off of trees or flowers, we can rule out using Verdure over the water. Next, we will find a place that will spawn as many trees and flowers as possible. This is a really nuanced topic, so I'll probably attach an addendum tutorial on Verdure. Check the description. It'll come out in the future at some point. Before I get ahead of myself, I should keep in mind that Verdure will scale off of mountain shrines, hermitages, and shamans. So aren't we missing points by not playing them first and Verdure second? Yes and no. All of these buildings benefit from the trees that Verdure will produce, more than the Verdure benefits from being placed beside these buildings, so we gain relatively more points by playing Verdure first, even if we have to leave its adjacency bonuses on the table. As a result, it's the building entity that we play first, as it needs a lot of open green space and is not reliant on others. Okay, with the Verdures placed, I will take a short detour to the boon bar. I will bring these up as I go, so don't think about them much yet. They'll make sense in time. One of these boons is Blossom, which will turn any trees in a large area into blooming trees, which count as both flowers and trees, and it will give points for each conversion. We use this on the largest pack of trees, closest to the center as we can, as a raw upgrade. Not much to say, this is the only way that you can use this boon to its greatest effect. Next on the docket is parks, and let's go the list starting from the bottom. They like trees, flowers, and blooming trees, which we have just created a massive amount of. They like houses and mansions, but those cannot easily enter our parkland without bulldozing all of the trees, so we don't want to consider them. Bulldozing a tree means placing a building over top of it, and removing that tree will not scale future parks, or the Hermitage, or the mountain shrine as much as it should be, so we don't want to get rid of any trees if we can help it. That same goes for the city center, the plateau, the terrace, the fountain, and the temple, because they will also take up too much space and easily bulldoze our trees. Not something we want to do. Now, a tower could be placed first before a park, and the park afterwards, for an overall gain of 2 points, but to simplify things and to make tower placing easier in the late game, I elect not to do so because it's honestly just too much of a mental tax or strain for me to keep straight, and I would probably lose more points by trying to eke out the extra 2 from this. It's not very much, and making sure that the tower is in like a central location is probably going to give you more points than trying to get parks gaining points off of a tower. And then parks also like hermitages at a rate of +5, but hermitages like parks the exact same amount, and since hermitages have a much larger radius than parks, it's easier to detect a park after it has been played by a hermitage, as opposed to placing a hermitage first and then placing parks around it. Now, in select circumstances, you could play your Hermitage or your Monument at this point, but I'm going to save those until later because usually you'll bulldoze a tree or two, and so it'll be easier to handle it in the late game. I'm also going to assume that no houses or mansions, terraces, plateaus, none of those are going to encroach on your garden. If they do, now is the time to play your Hermitage to make sure that it's hitting as many blossom trees as possible. With parks out of the way, we can now safely start our residential district, and we're going to do so by playing our masons. But before that, let's go back to our boons and spawn a Wisp. This little guy will ping from building to building, so long as they score, positively or negatively, off of each other. If we place the Wisp on the statue, and then put our masons close enough, it'll ping onto the mason and grant us +5 per movement. Now you'll need to keep in mind that your city centers, plateaus, terraces, houses, not cliff houses, and not shamans will want to be beside these masons. It is very, very difficult to find the perfect spot for them, and it's something that you really just have to feel out and spend honestly 15 minutes toying around with. Where do my city centers go? Where do my plateaus go? Where can my terraces go? To make sure you get this right. There is no one thing that I can say to make your masons be placed in the perfect location. And while the masons do take a -4 and then -8 reduction in points if you keep them so close together, it's going to make it immensely easier when you place your city centers, plateaus, or terraces to hit all of them if they're all beside each other. Plus that wisp that is bouncing to and from them will make it a +1 in points and then a -3 in points. So it's not that bad to put all of the masons directly beside each other. Next up come the city centers, since the only other scaling they have is +2 off of guild halls, and placing a guild hall this early is not worth the space nor the points. We will want to place the city centers next to a wall so that we can overhang wall platforms over top of them to increase the effective amount of space that we can put residential buildings beside the city centers, and so that cliff houses may benefit from them, and so that when we put shamans beside these city centers, the shamans can get a point increase by having more of their raise blocked. It is worth considering if we want to duplicate a city center, but that's not going to be discussed by me in this video yet. There's too many options as to what we can duplicate and what will give the most points that I want to feel it out by doing a few more runs, and I just don't have the time for that yet. So we're going to leave the duplications and the bargains off the table. Now, if we go back into our boon bar, we'll notice one of them, neighborly, that will stop the point reduction if we put like buildings close to each other. Since city centers have the highest amount of point reduction from being beside each other, and we do want them to be close to each other so that a residential district can be condensed and they can benefit off of multiple city centers, this is the best use of neighborly that we're going to get. In between placing city centers, place shamans down so that the wisp may bounce back and forth to mitigate some of the point losses, and make sure to have the shaman hold on to the wisp at the end. We need to make sure that the shaman is holding onto the wisp at the end so that the pyres that are soon to be played do not steal the wisp and hold onto it for the rest of the game. Now, why do we place the shamans here when we could instead place them in the blooming tree gardens we made earlier? Well, when I was placing them in my blooming tree gardens, I had roughly 65 point shamans on average. If I were to place all 3 of them up there, I had an outlier that was scoring 80 points. Even that 80-point shaman would still be outscaled so long as I played roughly 7 mansions and 7 cliff houses in the vicinity, and I played well more than this in my current game, and I also got an extra 15 points on top of that by having a temple in range. It is more worth it to play a low point shaman that is going to be surrounded by buildings than one that is going to be getting a lot of points earlier on by putting it in your blooming tree garden. Next, we place pyres, as they only scale off of lighthouses, which need to come later, and they scale off of terraces. But terraces will normally block line of sight to your city centers, since they're played so close to them to increase the amount of residential buildings that you can place in that area, so it's not worth the extra 2 points per pyre to block the line of sight to a city center on either of the first 2 pyres that you play. Of course, position these pyres as far away from your city centers as possible, and so the second pyre that you play is as far from the other pyre as it can be to maximize its score. These points range from 9 to 12 for city center to pyre, and -7 or so to +15 if going from pyre to pyre. You'll also notice that I said place 2 pyres earlier. That was not a misspeak. We have 3 pyres total, but there is a boon in our boon bar called Precious, which adds +1 to the building score for every entity, foliage, so like flowers or trees, or building in its range, and this is best used on a pyre at the end of the game since it has the largest range by far, so we have to save one of them for that end gameplay. Next comes placing terraces and plateaus. These should both be placed near the city centers so that your residential buildings can both scale off of the plateaus and terraces and the city centers at the same time, maybe even the shamans as well, and they should be done so to increase the amount of space that you have available to play houses on. The terraces do so automatically, but the plateaus can be placed alongside cliff faces to sometimes even out with them and allow you to place buildings on that cliff face and at the plateau at the same time. Now, in this run, I do duplicate one of my terraces to increase my effective real estate for my residential areas, but seeing how well my mountain shrines scored, I think it might be better to duplicate that. But again, that's conversation left for another video. Okay, so the terraces and the plateaus are down, and they're waiting for residential buildings. Now's the time to build them. But what first? Houses, mansions, or cliff houses? Both cliff houses and houses have enough range that they can reach a wall platform from the ground, usually, And I'm talking about wall platforms positioned above the city center because we want to make sure that we have the majority of our real estate centered around the city centers. So mansions have a smaller range than houses. They cannot reach those wall platforms above. So mansions are safe to play around our city centers on the base level before any of our wall platforms go down. So we'll start there. Now you could technically play your wall platforms first here and then struggle to try to find a perfect spot for your mansions or your cliff houses underneath, but since there's a lot of weird camera angles involved and you might not get them in exactly the place that you want to, you are probably going to be leaving points on the table if you play your wall platforms first. I know that they give you an extra point for your cliff houses that go on the wall, but if you get even one less cliff house beside your city center, that's a loss of 4 points. So in my opinion, it is not worth it to play the wall platforms before you play a majority of your cliff houses on the wall that you're building your city centers next to. Now I am getting a bit ahead of myself here. We should go back to the mansions and double check to make sure that there's nothing else that should be played before they go down. So from the top down, city center +8, check. Terrace +7, check. Wall platform +6, can't get in range yet. Shaman +6, already placed. Plateau +6, already placed. Fountain, it's the same amount of points as the mansion is, yet the fountain has a larger range, so it's better to play the fountain afterwards to get more mansions within its range. Don't need to worry about that. Tower +2. The tower gets +1 for each mansion, so like the parks, it is more points to play the tower first and the mansion second, but this is again too much of a mental strain, so I don't want to lose any of the points on forgetting to place a mansion in a specific area beside where my tower is going to go at the end of the game. That's not happening. We don't worry about it. Next. Temple +2. Temple scores massively more off of mansions. We're not playing a mansion beside a temple. Park +2. We've already played all of them. Don't need to worry. Guildhall. We don't want to take up valuable real estate near the city centers with a guild hall, so they don't get placed either. Market +2. It's the same amount of points as if a market, a market is placed beside a mansion, but the market has a much larger range, so just like the towers, but without the point loss, it's better to play the market second. Mountain Shrine +2. That's going to be played later. And it's going to get 1 point off the mansion, but the mountain shrine needs to be played at such a high location to make sure that all of our gardens are in range that we don't need to worry about placing we can't worry about placing a mansion beside the mountain shrine. It doesn't happen. Cliff House, it's the same amount of points as a mansion, but the Cliff House has a slightly larger range, so it's better to play the mansions first and the Cliff Houses second, because the Cliff Houses will be in range of more mansions. So yes, nothing on that list raised any flags, so we are allowed to play mansions at this point in the game without any kind of worry. Okay, once the first layer of mansions has been built, you can feel free to put cliff houses down along your wall that you are going to be putting wall platforms onto. Do not overbuild and remove your ability to play wall platforms directly on top of your city centers. You do not want to place cliff houses too high that it starts blocking the wall platform placement. The limiting factor should be the height of your city centers. Once you've played a comfortable amount of cliff houses along your walls, play a wall platform above them to cap them off, and begin playing your mansions up top again. Now I should note that your Wisp should have been bouncing from mansion to mansion, and then from a mansion onto a cliff house. Your cliff houses bring it up to where the wall platform is, and your mansion is now able to take that Wisp off and onto it again. You should not have lost a single Wisp bounce during this time. They are worth a lot of points. If you can, save 2x2 pockets where your fountains can go, preferably still in range of the city center, but not where your mansions are in range of the city center, as you want to give them the ability to score 50 points, like mansions being worth 50 points on a city center, and fountains beside those mansions being worth 50 points themselves because they are also scaling off of the city centers. Do not place all of your fountains, as this is your method of taking a Wisp from a mansion and moving it to a house, which you need to do at least once, but will probably be done more than once through your residential buildings. Now I say leave 2x2 pockets open for where fountains can go. That just means that it's the same size as a square mansion. It's only because the fountain has a larger range than a mansion that we need to do this, because we want the fountain to hit as many mansions as possible, and leaving these pockets behind rather than playing a fountain early will make sure that it hits more mansions on the outskirts of its radius. Now, this exact same reasoning can be applied to houses and circuses, but houses should be placed segregated from your mansions, and there should be a 3x3 slot open for a singular circus later in the game. The reason we segregate the communities into mansions and houses is that a lot of buildings later, like docks and harbors, want to scale purely off of houses and not off of mansions. This also applies to saunas, but they don't take a negative for being beside mansions. If we keep them segregated, it will be easier to hit more of that specific house type, as in the house, with those buildings. Something I have neglected to mention is that you will need to save a 5x5 space around your city centers, your mansions, your cliff houses, your shamans, and your houses for a temple, since it will score roughly 600 points if you can get it in the center of your area. That is where you're going to use your increased size boon because it has such a small radius, but it gets you so many points if you play it properly, and it's much easier to play it properly if you have an increase in range. Also, I haven't gone over the particulars of houses or cliff houses because they are very similar to mansions in that every building that could be played before it to grant it more points is better played later or has more range, so we play it later, or is too much mental strain, like towers, to consider, so we do not play it yet. Now, the residential district does consist of over 75 buildings total, 25 cliff houses, 25 mansions, 25 houses, as well as your temple, your fountains, your circus, your sauna. There are so many things to consider here that you need to do this a couple times and build up a few intuitions as to where buildings should go, what feels like a good point total or what doesn't. I can't provide too many more details than what I already have without just voicing over my gameplay decisions, and this is the most skill expressive part of the build. It is very hard to distill this down into an exact science, and I don't think it can be an exact science. Now, I will assume that all residential buildings have been placed, and we just have this single large point total buildings left to play, like the temple, circus, market, etc. There are two distinct lines to take, one that gives you 10 wisp bounces for a total of 50 points, or one that gives you 4 wisp bounces for 20 points. You will be leaving 30 points on the table if you do not do one of these lines, but it is more difficult to take that line, or it will get rid of a few trees, which then scale your mountain shrines and hermitages less, so it may not be viable to take. This is where you would need to do the math yourself to see which one is better. And I shouldn't get ahead of myself. Before we talk about the wisp bounce lines, you should take note of where the guild hall can be placed for a decent amount of points, and if any of your future buildings, like the single objects that you have left, can't be played for a large amount of points, look to see if they can be placed roughly in the area of the guild hall, because it will give it an extra 12 points, the guild hall, which can mean that you earn more points. For an example of this, I'm going to show a lighthouse on screen that was worth 27 points. If I moved it further out to the coastline, it would have been worth 38, but that's only an 11-point increase. If I put it close to the coast, that means that it's in range of my guild hall, which gets plus 12 for being beside a lighthouse, so that lighthouse is actually worth 39 points total. It's in that you can use your guild house to eke out a few more points with your buildings, specifically your harbor and your dock, because usually the city that you've built is not too close to the coastline and can't get too many points by micromanaging where your harbor or your dock goes. So now let's start with the easy wisp bounce line. We're going to play the tower in range of as many trees or buildings that it can be in, and still within range of the temple, because the temple is going to get plus 10 points off of it. Your wisp should move from your last residential building to this tower, and then to your temple afterwards, which you should be using the range upgrade boon on the building because it significantly increases its amount of points. Now, if able, you should play your monument in range of the temples and the two city centers that should be relatively close to each other, and all of the parks that you've played before. Now, I didn't mention that you should be playing your garden close to your residential area at the beginning, because this is one of the only caveats that should be made, is that the monument needs to be played in between the two of them. And taking that much effort is not worth the extra 20 or 30 points when you could be focusing on making the best garden possible and the best residential areas possible. If you get the extra points from having these close, great, that's awesome. You can now also play the Circus in the 3x3 pocket that you left behind for it, since nothing else scales it, and particularly that the temple isn't taking a negative by playing your Circus first. The same goes for the market. The market is an unruly 4x4, I mean, slightly smaller than the temple, but it's still difficult to play, and it doesn't give as many points as the temple, so you don't want to play around it. Try to play it on the edge of your residential area. This is usually a building that you get in range of the guild hall for an extra 12 points. Harbors should be played next, as the buildings that grant it points have already been played, or, like in the case with docks, they give a menial amount of points, whereas the docks give more points for being played after the harbor. Docks can now be played for the same reasoning. The Lighthouse that's going to grant it a menial amount of points is better if the Lighthouse is played second and takes points from the dock existing. And wow, would you look at that, it is now time to play our Lighthouse because we've played the harbors and the docks. The only way that the Lighthouse can be more valuable is if a Hermitage is in range, but I find this so exceedingly rare that a Lighthouse can be played in your garden area, and that it usually deletes trees in the area, is that the extra few points that it grants is not worth it. Play it in the spot beside your docks and your harbors. Next, huts can go down wherever they grant the most points. They usually have such a large radius that you can just scan over your area to find the greatest amount. You're going to want to try to hit the statue, the shamans, the city centers, and the lighthouse without hitting your masons. This is usually doable, but you might not get absolutely everything, and that's fine. It's a loss of maybe 5 to 10 points, and that's it. With that being said, huts should also go down close to either your garden or your houses. You should be using your sauna next, and you're going to check to see where it gets the most points. The huts should be placed within this radius somewhere because the sauna gets more points from the huts than the huts do from the sauna. It's +3 to +2, so you're getting an overall increase of 5 points by playing your huts first. Like I said earlier, the sauna's next. It should go down where your trees are in a very plentiful amount or where your houses are in a very plentiful amount. If you're lucky, you'll hit both. If you're extra lucky, you'll hit both with your huts in between them. The sauna does also scale off the Hermitage, so if you haven't played that building yet, you might be able to get it in range, but if it deletes a tree away from the mountain shrine that has been yet to be played, do not play your Hermitage yet. It's not worth the extra 5 points. Now, with us only having 4 buildings left, those being the Guild Hall, the Hermitage, the Mountain Shrine, and the Pyre, you can turn on the Precious Boon and try scanning around your area for where the Pyre is worth the most amount of points. We play it here instead of at the very end because the Mountain Shrine gets +3 for detecting the Pyre, and the Pyre can also move the Wisp onto itself using the Precious Boon from where it is on the monument, and the Mountain Shrine can then take the Wisp again, giving us an overall score of +13 from the Wisp, the Mountain Shrine detecting the Pyre, and the second Wisp bounce. So it is better to play the Precious Pyre a little bit early. If you could, you can also play your Guild Hall at this point if it's not beside your Hermitage, your Mountain Shrine, or your Pyre, but the Guild Hall should be played after the Pyre if it's going to be in the Guild Hall's range, because +12 is much better than +1. Alright, now is the time where we play the Mountain Shrine, because we want to make sure that it detects the most blooming trees possible, and we needed to build all of our other buildings because it scales off of a lot of the residential buildings, and the pyres and things like that. We were waiting on the pyre to be turned into precious, and that scales off of every entity, so this had to be one of the last buildings played. Now, we play it before the Hermitage because usually your Hermitage is large and unruly and can't be fit really well in your garden area. It's going to delete some trees, so it's better to have the Mountain Shrine detect more trees before that Hermitage bulldozes them over, so we play it second to last. I should also note that it's likely that this building, the Mountain Shrine, is going to be worth the most points, second to the temple, but the temple needed the range increase to increase its score, and the Mountain Shrine doesn't need any boon. So we are now able to use the score multiplier to its greatest effect. You'll usually get like an extra 200 points from a score multiplier, which is great. Nothing else compares, not the monument, not the tower, not the circus, not the market. The Mountain Shrine is where you're most likely going to use your score multiplier. Now, your Hermitage can be played since it's going to bulldoze a few trees, but there's no other buildings that care about that at this point. Find a spot where it's worth the most points and place it. and that does it. So this is the line that you should be taking when you're playing fully stacked. There is skill expression when it comes to the positioning of things, but I think this is definably the best way to play all of your buildings. Except for that little addendum that I talked about earlier, the Wisp bouncing that you can do, where you bounce it 10 times instead of 4 or 5 across of your buildings, instead of going tower into temple, into monument, into the precious pyre, into the mountain shrine at the end. Maybe the Hermitage picks it up, can't fully remember. You can instead play your market before your temple. Make sure that the market is outside of the temple's range because you don't want to take the -20 hit, and you want to make sure that your market is grabbing the Wisp from your last residential building. From here, you can then play your harbor and your docks, making sure that the Wisp bounces onto them, of course, then your lighthouse, and then you're going to play 4 of your huts. Not all 5 of them, but 4 of them, bouncing the Wisp onto one of them. You'll then play your sauna next because the Wisp will bounce from one of the huts onto the sauna, and then you'll play your hut in range of your sauna to bounce the Wisp back onto it. You then cap off this line like you do the other one, where you're going to play a precious pyre that will bounce the Wisp from wherever it is, should be on one of the huts right now, to the pyre, and then your mountain shrine at the end because it's going to gain points from your pyre. This changes the total number of end game bounces from 5 to 10, netting an extra 24 points. Notice I say 24 points and not 25 because we're adding an extra 5 Wisp bounces, 25 points, but we're subtracting 1 point because we play our sauna before playing all of our huts. Because the sauna gets plus 3 points for being in range of a hut, but a hut only gets plus 2 points from being in range of a sauna, we take a singular point loss. This was a consideration I made when I was running my current world record, but because my market was worth 25 less when I moved it out of range of the temple, it was not worth it to do all of these extra Wisp bounces. Plus, it would have been hard to get my huts in range of the lighthouse and the sauna definitively, because if anything goes wrong, then I'm losing out on a few Wisp bounces maybe. If you know that you can get this done, hey, an extra 24 points to you, but it is difficult to pull off. All of this to say, my current world record is not even close to being perfect. There's a lot of room for improvement. A few extra Wisp bounces at the end are one thing, but the harbors and docks not being in range of my many houses is another. That's going to lose me at least 50 points, if not more. Another large fault of mine was not moving my terrace closer to the wall that I was building on, which meant that most of my cliff houses were out of range of my temple by the time I was placing it, which lost me at least 80 points, which is a hard pill to swallow. I also want to note that there were not many trees in the area where I first started playing Verdures, which means that my Blossom Boon, my parks that I played in the area, my Mountain Shrine, and my Hermitage could all be worth more. And all of that isn't even considering which building is best to duplicate. This leaves us with a respectable, but not perfected world record. I would love to see other people take my spot and to vie for the first place position, rather than have it handedly by 500 points, which, at the time of editing this video, used to be 800, so good job for the people who are climbing the leaderboards. I hope to see you guys overtaking me soon. It's gonna be fun.